you always hear, and you're going to hear it in pretty much every podcast with every founder that ever made something. I sat in a room for 9 months and coded something and then didn't talk to people. And then I showed it to them and they didn't like it. Or like it wasn't getting the users I wanted, right?
Yes, I heard that before.
Yeah, I think everybody hears it and everybody says, yeah, but I'm different a little bit, or I'm not doing that, or you're not consciously doing it on purpose. You're just, before I do this thing or show this person, I want to fix this one thing or this one thing. And next time you wake up, it's 9 months later. And I think that's what happens, and people don't realize it when they're doing it, but I fell victim to that.
Welcome to the Raw and Real podcast. Are you dreaming of changing your life through opening a business, or are you curious what obstacles entrepreneurs had to overcome on their journey? Then you're in the right place. My name is Agnes Bilik, and I'm your host. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Raw and Real. Today's guest on the show is Tegan Spinner. He's a designer, developer, and founder of Lokalist. Hey Tegan, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a bit about Localist?
Yeah, so I've been working on Localist for about 2.5 years now, actually. We've gone through a lot of changes and development. It's kind of like the journey of me going from being very American to slightly Danish, I would say, in the fact that when we first started, the idea was focused very heavily on the money and how to get the best price for your items quickly when you sell them online. So we used machine learning and AI to help people understand the value of items they have. And then it's evolved a bit as we've developed into the future, into a platform that has a bigger mission. We focus now today only on smartphones and reducing the amount of e-waste they create. We have a program that we're working on called Pay It Forward, where basically the average person in Europe has 2 to 5 smartphones in their drawer right now, sitting, being wasted. Our focus is to motivate you and encourage you to pull them out of the drawer and reintroduce them into the circular economy. And one of the ways we try to do that is by offering you a very fair price and then saying we are only going to sell it for about 30 euros more maximum than what we offer you. So you don't feel like you're getting screwed over if you give it to us. We are actually trying to get it sold as quickly as possible. Another part is that we offer you a backup phone if you ever sell your phone to Localist. So there's no reason to leave it in the drawer as a backup. If you ever need a backup, we try to supply you one within 24 hours. And then, if you give us a phone, we make sure it's professionally wiped and cleaned before we sell it forward. So our main mission is to reduce this kind of big impact that smartphones are having on our environment. And it's been a really fun journey.
And how do you determine the price of the phone?
Yeah, so it's actually the way this machine learning works is it takes basically all of the items that are being sold on a site like Facebook Marketplace or Marketplaats here in the Netherlands, and it sees what people write about those items. So I have an iPhone 7 with a cracked screen. It doesn't have the receipt or a box. And we basically combine all of those listings and their similarities using computers' ability to process text. So it does pattern recognition on all the small different things that people write, and then compares that to how long was the listing active and what price did the person actually post it for. And that allows us to get a really good idea of what is the correct price to make sure that you're selling this phone within 3 days, which is one of our goals. So no matter what condition your phone may be in, we help you understand exactly that price, not just the average for a phone in your city. So that's kind of our unique selling point.
And what do you do with the damaged phones then?
Yeah, so damaged phones, actually, we have partners that are looking to purchase damaged phones. That's one of the biggest reasons they end up in the drawer. You dropped it on the floor, it got a cracked screen, and instead of replacing it, it was getting a bit old anyway, so you buy a new one. And a lot of people see that cracked phone as completely worthless. And that's one of the things when we say we wipe the data. Of course, a lot of people know how to factory reset the phone and things like that, but if the screen is broken, then you can't go in and do that. And you don't have the tools to wipe it or be able to see, right? So this is one of the things that we try to do. But the parts inside are still valuable. We actually have this sort of marketing campaign we're working on right now that sort of mocks the new Apple iPhones websites, right? And the campaign is there's more to your phone than you think. And basically, when you explode it out into a sort of 3D view, you see all of the components that it takes to make your phone work on a daily basis. One of the most interesting facts we found was that the average smartphone only does not use 18 of the elements on the periodic table. So of the 190, whatever it is, that are not radioactive, only 18 of them are not in your phone. So all of those minerals that are being extracted and elements being extracted from the earth combine into one device in your pocket. The problem is we produce 60 of those devices per second every year.
Yeah,
and
wow.
That's an insane amount, and it's not a sustainable practice. So we're going to need to change the way we consume electronics and smartphones in the future. So
yeah, definitely. And listen, I'm really curious because you're American and you moved from Silicon Valley to Copenhagen and started Localist there. Shouldn't it be the other way around?
yeah, so actually I talk a little bit about this on LinkedIn, and when I meet Danish people, they don't understand often how great an ecosystem they have for early stage startups. So America is great if you're the best at what you do. If you're the best actor, you go to Hollywood. The best musicians, you go to LA and New York. So if you're in the top 1%, it is definitely the best place to be. Most startups are not like that. If they go to Silicon Valley, they will get destroyed because it's just a hyper-competitive area where you need $1 million in investment just to fight through the crowd. In Denmark, one of the very interesting things is that you can start building something with a very homogenous population, so you can kind of know who you're talking to, but you can start building something with people who have other motivations than money as well. So the best developers go to Silicon Valley because they know they're going to get the best salaries, and they're competitive. They want to be the number one developer kind of thing, right? In Denmark, there's other motivations that people have. They want to enjoy their work-life balance. They want to have, feel like they're making a difference in the job they're doing. And these are really things that you can play on as a startup to help build a team and get something off the ground for a lot less money. On top of that, all the students are getting something called SU, or getting paid to study. So as a baseline, you have a group of young, hungry people with no job experience, but their PhD, pursuing their PhD degrees. And they need to have their first chance to showcase their skill sets, and there's no better place than a startup. So I think that it's a really interesting ecosystem that they have, especially when you're just starting out. Once you're big, once your idea is validated and you have traction and you have, you want to go to the scale-up stage, I think then you need to consider, maybe moving or expanding or having operations in other countries, of course. But yeah, early stage, it's the place to be.
So you think it's also better for your team building because people are motivated in a different way than in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I think that makes a huge difference when you're trying to start. When it's not about the money in the beginning, you're able to pull together a better team. And I think that's one thing that's really Danish, is that they're not caring so much about the money, but other things that that matter to them. And so that's an overrated or underrated part of Danish culture, especially when you're talking from a startup's perspective, because in Silicon Valley that's not the case, and you're not going to get government grants to help you get your company off the ground, and you're not going to get somebody who just wants to work with you because they believe in your cause. They're going to be like, yeah, I want my paycheck here and here and my benefits and XYZ, right? And that's okay. That's the culture, and that's why America breeds these, global companies that are there to win and destroy everything. That's what we do, and that's what we're good at. But in the very early stages, I think it's a danger for your company. So I think it's a better incubator.
And you speak English, and Copenhagen has its own language, and Denmark in general. So wasn't it quite scary for you to start a company in a foreign country?
Yeah, well, it makes it easier that the Danes are very good at English. So a lot of times it's not required that you speak Danish. But I also got into learning Danish quite quickly. I'm not fluent by any means, but I would say that I can understand about 90% of conversation now. And before I started my company, I had lived in Denmark for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I was getting pretty comfortable. I do think it's required if you want to start a company and actually succeed in Denmark to at least have a very good or at least basic understanding of Danish. I mean, your taxes will come to you in Danish. You'll get paperwork and notifications from the government that you need to understand. Of course, you could have somebody translate them or whatever, but if you don't know everything that's kind of going on, you're setting yourself up for like failure down the line, in my opinion.
For sure, that's a big disadvantage.
So it's scary, but at the same time, I think it's an advantage because I think, one, it's easy for me to go from country to country to country and everybody's understanding English. I'm here in Amsterdam today. All the pitches, all the whole competition wasn't in, Dutch. It was in English. And I think having that be my natural language helps me in some cases. So there's pros and cons, as there is with most things.
And what were your challenges initially?
I think when I say there's one problem still the Danish ecosystem has with early stage companies, so everything else is perfect except raising money. And that's because the investors, rightfully so, are very pessimistic. They don't have, that's in Silicon Valley, there's this optimism that, yeah, you're going to be the next great thing and thank you, here's $1 million, have fun, call me in 6 months and you're going to be a unicorn.
So it's that easy?
Yeah. Well, it's much easier if you have the right idea and network and background. You can walk into some places and walk out with a check. Maybe not so much in the past few years, but at some point along, that's why they were what they were. In Denmark, they will be very bluntly honest, as they are with most things, about your business, about your business model, how you're going to make money, much more practical, which I think is also a very positive thing for you as an early stage company, but also can be very difficult to overcome. On top of that, they don't... I have a pitch deck that's the same that was in Danish krona and in euros and trying to raise in London and Denmark. And it's the same thing. The only thing that changed was the currency symbol, right? It's because I think they overvalue the fact that 500,000 krona is not that much money. It is if you want to build a Danish company, if you want to do something that is startup, unicorn, things that people think of as startups, you do need a bit more initial capital than that, or you need to understand that 500,000 krona isn't that much money. It only takes me this far. I think one thing I notice a lot of founders, early stage founders in Denmark do, is they don't understand that fact, and that's not their fault. But I think that they see 500,000 krona, like, oh yeah, now I've got it, I've made it, I got my first check, and they're gonna give away 20% of their company for that. And then when they go to raise their next round of funding, they realize that they've given away too much for too little. Now they need more money to get the product actually out there and alive. So that's one of the things that I think was the biggest challenge, was raising our first checks in the beginning and kind of figuring out how to hack our round for our first round of money. Because I didn't come from a lot of money, or my mom wasn't giving me a check for $100,000 or anything like that.
So what was your solution in the end? How do you convince people?
Yeah, so what I did is I basically thought like an investor for a little while, and I broke down what exactly, if I were an investor, I would want to hear. So I cut out a lot of the complexities of startup investing, all these kind of things that a lot of people don't really know how they work. In an early ecosystem like Copenhagen, they're just sort of starting to get, in the past 3 to 5 years, really a good, understanding of how startup investing should work when it goes correctly, because now they've got a few success cases and they can say, oh, now I get it, and go on. But what I found is that if you broke the investment strategy down into 1%, so I was selling 1% of my company for 25,000 Danish krona, and I would pitch it at Friday bars, I'd pitch it at whoever would listen to me, I'd go to a birthday party, and I'm like selling this 1%, right? And that worked really well, because I said, okay, I'm gonna ask you for 25,000 krona, But forget about the 1%. My goal is in 18 months, I'm going to make it 100,000 krona. I think I can 4x your money with my company and my idea, and this is how it works. And so I kind of flipped around all of the, like, then they had to believe in me and the idea and that kind of thing, but it wasn't so complex. It was easy to see what I wanted and what they would get out of it, and then do they believe me that I can actually do that?
I think it also helps if you're just in a normal social environment and the pressure is kind of off.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, a lot of founders, they still say, oh, I want to raise 500,000 krona for 10%. I was just saying I want to raise 50,000 for 1. And even if you're getting 500,000 krona or 50,000, there's people in Denmark who have that kind of money, and like 50,000 krona, and, if it goes well, cool. If not, it's not the worst thing in the world. But when it becomes 500,000 krona you're asking for, that's actually a significant amount. They're like, now I really need to think about everything you're doing, and if I go into much deeper detail. So I think it helped us kind of get that early check of, I just believe in you, and this is sort of a lottery ticket kind of size. And when you had the right audience, it was I think a lot easier to convince them to take a chance on you.
And in your experience, where did you find the right audience?
So that was really everywhere. I mean, that was through a matter of just pitching nonstop for like 4 months, like all this time, 1% for this much. And I did it so that they all had the same deal. So during that phase, I was trying to raise, I think it was about 10 or 15%. And I said, this is going to be the same deal for everybody. You can sign on now, you can sign on in a month, doesn't matter. Like, until I get this 15%, that's what I'm raising money at. So all of them were on the same kind of flat deal that were my first, they're 5 or 6 business angels. And they didn't all buy just 1%. Some wanted 5, some wanted 2, some just wanted 1. And I mean, one time I crashed a guy's birthday party. He ended up being an investor. A Friday bar, my first boss in Denmark ended up being one of my investors. So kind of like friends, family, fools. I would say that was how I did my round. That was like that. So.
Wow, that sounds like fun.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and it was really motivating because after you got the first check, then it was much easier to say to people, I already got 1 check. Are you next? Do you want to miss out on this opportunity? And I was really good at being like, not pushy, but motivating, I would say. So, for instance, I remember one of the first checks we closed. They were like, I don't know, I don't think it's a good idea, something like that. Like, I really like you, but I don't know about it. And after I left the meeting, they wanted to invest in me, but for more percentage. So instead of 25 for 1%, they wanted like 5% or something for the same money. They were willing to give me the check. And I told them I wasn't willing to do that sort of, that valuation or that kind of deal. And after I left that night, I sent them an email of like the top 50 people who could have invested in early stage companies like Facebook or Google or Apple, and what that would have been worth had they given just, $1,000 to Steve Jobs when he was trying to get a little bit for his first Mac or something.
Yeah.
So I sent them this, and it was all these guys who were like, yeah, I could have invested in Google, but I decided, I wasn't quite sure. So that was the email I sent. And just like, if you guys change your mind, I just wanted to, tell you a few stories about people who missed out on guys in their very early days. Don't want you to end up like them.
And that worked out in the end for you?
Yeah, they ended up being an investor. So that it was kind of a bit bold, but they liked it, and they ended up investing in us, both of those guys who were challenging the valuation. So,
that's so cool.
So I think sometimes it works. I mean, it could have went badly, but at the end of the day, I didn't want to accept that valuation. So, that is what it is. But so I was quite happy with it. I was like, yeah, I can't believe that worked the way I wanted it to. But that's entrepreneurship.
And in the beginning, because you said that there were some problems with raising money, weren't you also afraid that the company would fail?
I think that goes a little bit to the thing I was talking about in the beginning. The people who we had on the team, even for quite a while into the project, were doing it sort of bootstrapped. They were there for reasons that weren't money. So I had this quote that startups run on motivation, right? So if you have motivation or you know how to motivate your team, then your startup just can't die. Like there's no way for it to die, because that's just how it works. So you don't need capital, you don't need an office, you don't need 1,000 users. You need like 3 motivated people with varied skill sets to start to push an idea into reality. And that's what I had, and I didn't need to pay for it at that time, so I wasn't quite worried. It's a matter of, how long can people go on motivation and, and this kind of thing, of course.
Fair point.
We still have rent and lights and bills and stuff like that, of course. But I think I was really good at building a team that was there for the right reasons. So even when things started to, go wrong, and we wanted to do a pivot and we wanted to change this stuff, or we raise money, then we run out of it, I was quite confident that I would be able to motivate a group of people around me and keep it moving forward. So that's, I call us like a phoenix. It's just really hard for Localist to die. We've gone through some changes and phases, but we always sort of rise from the flames and come back and keep trying until we start to get the right product market fit. And that's, I think, what it's about. So.
And can you tell us a bit about the moment when you really failed?
I think the time where I felt like I failed the most is when we released our product for the first time. We had just developed our first version MVP, and it was going live. And it was this marketplace where we were, buying and selling things. We're kind of much like a marketplace with some extra features. And you always hear, and you're going to hear it in pretty much every podcast with every founder that ever made something, I sat in a room for 9 months and coded something and then didn't talk to people. And then I showed it to them and they didn't like it. Like it wasn't getting the users I wanted, right?
Yes, I heard that before.
Yeah, I think everybody hears it and everybody says, yeah, but I'm different a little bit, or I'm not doing that. Or, you're not consciously doing it on purpose. You're just, before I do this thing or show this person, I want to fix this one thing or this one thing. And next time you wake up, it's 9 months later. And I think that's what happens, and people don't realize it when they're doing it. But I fell victim to that. And I think it wasted a lot of people's time and energy and effort when we had to go through that pivot in the first place. It probably would happen to me again, because you get into this mindset and you're just working and grinding. But I'm a little bit more aware of the second time around and third time around of how long we're taking on something, or what is the pure essence of what we're trying to get across. I talked to somebody recently when I first landed in Amsterdam, and I think the reason this happens actually is the creation of the term, the MVP in general. I think if I were to run an accelerator or run some sort of startup think tank, I would say that you should kill the idea of having an MVP at all. And that you should focus first on sort of the marketing and telling the story. And if this was completely built tomorrow in your grand vision, sell that, and put your first $1,000 into making that story correct. Because once you have the story, you can always build the tech. It's much different the other way around. And when you try to fit the tech into a story, it normally doesn't work. So I would say that's also what we tried to do.
So a little bit growth hacking.
Yeah, So I would say, when you're trying to fit the tech into the story, it doesn't resonate. The first version of Localist is get the best price for your used items and stuff like this. And then you're trying to tell the story, but that story isn't good. And you find that out after you've worked for 9 months on the tech. So I would say, my piece of advice would be find the story first. And that's also probably my biggest failure that I've had so far. Was not the customer, the research, the whatever. It's the story that resonates with people without me having to force it, where they just listen to it and they're like, yeah, that's a good story. That's a good idea. Because I think once you get to that point, then it's a lot easier to build the idea. It's a lot harder to come up with the story first, I think.
So how did you find the right story in the end?
I think that's a bit of trial and error, and that's why it was failure. Like, failure should be something, you look back on it and could have been, I could have done that better. Trial and error is not the right way to go about life forever. Eventually you want to be a bit more scientific about how you do things. So I'd say that the way we came across our sort of story was we always had this sort of, we want to be sustainable, this is an angle, but we also want to help people price and sell their items. And when we could compare, telling people, hey, your phone is 2,000 krona or about 250 euros on a Facebook ad, click here, we help you sell it in, 3 easy steps. We could notice nobody was really clicking or caring. They're like, yeah, I know my phone is worth something, but I'm just too lazy to sell it, or I want it, like, it wasn't the right triggers, not the right story,
not the right push to get someone activated.
And I know that it's more of a failure now, because whenever I would pitch somebody, they'd be like, yeah, but I'd probably just leave it in my drawer, and I'd be like, yeah, maybe you're just not my target customer or something. But when you do that enough times, like, I think you sort of tell yourself you're right and this guy just doesn't get it. But I think if you have a good story, people will not question it. People will say, oh yeah, I think I would do that. I've got a couple things at home that I would do or put on your platform if this was the story. And I can see that very clearly now when I tell this sort of angle of, sustainability or doing the right things, and we talk about the pollution that smartphones are having on is created by the smartphone industry on the planet. You can start to see people really think about, I should probably be a little bit better about this. There's no reason, like, I don't care about the money as much, but there's no reason for me to have these 4 phones in a drawer somewhere that are just being wasted. And now I kind of see why I should use you, or why I should start to compare how to get rid of my stuff, right? So I think you can start to see that whether you're doing a business-to-business story, you're doing a consumer thing, whatever it may be, you're going to always get people who challenge you, right? But I think when you have the right story, it doesn't talk about the product at all. Like, I don't have to tell you what Localist does. I can just start talking about the smartphones being a bad problem, and when you can do that, then you can start to fit tech into solving that problem, and then that's your product, right? So I think I would encourage people to start to really sit down and think about what their story is and what they're kind of working on. Really, if their product was completely out of the picture, then what would the media care about covering? If you were doing it. So that would be how I would paint the picture, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a nice idea if you say, what would the media cover about that story?
Yeah, so I mean, Rockstar, this was an AI accelerator that we're going to be a part of right now. And I could see that a lot of people had really smart tech, really smart ideas, but then you start to go into the story about it, and what is going to get you known? That's going to be your next challenge. You can build the most amazing tech ever. If people don't know about you, then it doesn't matter. And if you have to pay a lot of money for people to know about you, then it's still not a sustainable business. So I think that it's equally important as all the tech to figure out, how do I, not necessarily growth hack or anything, like, how do I get people to care without paying them? It's that's I think something that is quite difficult to do, especially if you're trying to do like some high tech solution or whatever. Then I think it's a challenge.
I think the importance about this is having a team, because usually the people that are very technical don't necessarily have that skill of being more empathetic. And
I think the team definitely helps, especially if you're as a founder or somebody who is very technical in this kind of your domain. But I think also when you have the right story, you're able to motivate technical people. That's another really important part. Like, the story helps keep the team together. You get people who want to work for you because they believe in your story. You get all this kind of things if you can figure out the story first. So I think your MVP should really be like your minimum viable story. Like, what is this really, like, this thing that like is the least version of your product that could capture people's attention, the shortest Facebook ad that would get the most traction. I think if a startup can do that before they can do anything else, they will be on a much stronger, more straightforward path to success. So, because you can always find the technical people and all this kind of thing and put something together. But it's hard to tell a story.
So the minimum valuable story is what counts.
Yeah, the minimum valuable story. That can be the title of the podcast. Tegan Spinner and the minimum viable story. It's gonna be my book. It started here. No,
so you're gonna write a book about it?
Well, actually, that was the idea behind this. On LinkedIn, I write these posts called the first time guide, the guide to becoming a first time founder. And the idea was that all these accelerators and incubators and investors, they talk to you about your idea. What's your traction? Who's your target customer? Tell me your idea in 7 words, right? Nobody teaches you how to do payroll, how to do taxes, should you look for when you're hiring or building a team. Not in a sort of structured way that's kind of from people who have gone through that process and talked about, what was your first interview like? What were the questions you asked? What, made you feel like the CTO was the right CTO when you were in that moment? And did you make the right decision later? And this kind of stuff. I think there's something really interesting there that could be worked on, because if you can build a better founder, the idea changes, pivots, evolves as it should. But if the founder was broken from the beginning, I think that's the reason why 90% of startups fail. Is not because the founders have bad ideas. It's because the founder doesn't know how to, manage an office space, and nobody tells you how to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think there's something really interesting to look at when it comes down to that, startup culture and what goes on and what do people focus on.
So I guess we're just gonna have to follow your LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, maybe.
And what have you learned overall from failing, and how has that helped you grow to who you've become today?
I think that the biggest thing you learn from failing is if you like being an entrepreneur or not. So I say that meaning entrepreneurship is like a professional failure, if that makes sense. You have to be really good at failing, and not failing fast, as some people might say, but failing smart, failing upwards. So if you don't like the feeling of failure, I don't think you will like being an entrepreneur, or it'll be very stressful for you and very uncomfortable. So I would say the thing that I've learned the most from failing is that I really enjoy being an entrepreneur. I really enjoy failing and learning and growing, and then evolving. I feel like I'm learning more than I do in university or in any kind of other format. Maybe that's because I like learning by doing or whatever it is. But it's hard to fail, but at the same time, it's really interesting for me to see like, okay, so what now? And I like that whole problem solving and iteration and pushing forward. So that would be, I didn't realize I liked it that much in the beginning. Not that I don't like succeeding. That's also fun when something just works and you tried it and it did what you wanted it to do.
Yeah, I think that's always nice.
That's pretty nice as well, but I think enjoying failure is also part of being enjoying entrepreneurship.
So what do you specifically enjoy about it?
I think it's the fact of, maybe it's humbling in some ways. You think you've got these great ideas and you start to go and work on stuff, and then you each time realize that, oh, you're not actually really good at this thing, and you need to work on it, and if you want to succeed, or you need to find the right people to help you out. And you get a lot of appreciation for a lot of different skill sets that people have. So whether it's technical or accounting or legal or whatever it is, you get a lot of appreciation for their sort of domain and what they do. And I think I enjoy just like being able to have that sort of experience in, I tried this and it succeeded. I got to learn a lot of, I'm doing all this legal paperwork, and it's a lot of fun to, figure out how do I do my first employee contracts. That's another thing they don't teach you how to do in, anywhere. So I think it's just, I like learning, and you learn best through the failures. So.
And what kind of advice would you give to someone who would like to pursue a similar career like yours?
So if you want to pursue startups, don't. No, just kidding. No. I think if you want to launch your own business, the first thing I would say is that you got to just do it. Take the first steps and fail. and then you know what, you'll have figured out at least 3 things from those first steps. I think a lot of people who I've met who maybe want to start a startup, the things that they aren't doing are things that are easy to do. So, you know, they have this idea, they're interested in it, I want to start working on it. It's like, so why not? And a lot of times there's like these blockers that just keep you from trying to take those first steps. And I think that just not being afraid to fail would be the first piece of advice. Take the first steps. Don't be afraid to fail. Because it's also a little bit, it's embarrassing if you fail, and a lot of people don't want to do that. So that's why they kind of like, well, you know, it's, I'm interested, but I don't really know. And what if it doesn't work?
And if someone has that mental blockage, what would you advise them? Like, how can someone overcome that?
I think, let me see. How to overcome the fear of failure. That's pretty deep. You're going deep on me here. So if you were just to like tell people, how do you not be afraid of failing? This is like a minor psychology question. No.
Well, I thought you knew what you were getting into.
No, I thought I did too. But then I was thinking, I was like, you like, I think it just has to be in your DNA. Like, I mean, to try to convince somebody to not do something, they have to believe in it themselves. If you don't believe that, like, a lot of people be like, yeah, I know, I shouldn't be afraid of failure. And then they go and they're still afraid of failure. And that's, you know, same with me. If I'm going to go bungee jumping and I'll be like, yeah, I should, you know, just like overcome that fear. I'm not going to bungee jump anytime soon. Like, I'm just not going to do it. So you can't, for some people, it's really hard. You just have to have that sort of need or want or rush in your DNA. But it doesn't mean that you can't overcome it or you can't start to try to do things. And I would say to take tiny steps. You know, if it's really hard for you, this sort of fear, to take tiny steps and to make sure that you're failing smart. So if you fail smart, it's a lot less painful, if that makes sense. If you look back at it and you feel like you just did stupid stuff and that's why you failed, then I think it's really a hard pill to swallow, and it would be for me as well. But if I feel like I did everything the best I could, but then I learned what I did wrong, then I think, you know what, it could have been worse. So that would be.
And what kind of small steps would you take?
The first small steps would be, it depends on your stage or like what you're doing, but you know, if you're talking about an idea that you're interested in, the first step I would say is share your idea, because a lot of people are afraid to share their idea.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Everyone's just afraid that someone will steal it.
Yeah, nobody's going to steal it. Everybody's too lazy. I can guarantee you, like, if somebody's going to steal it, it would already be working on, like, somebody's working on it right now already. If nobody was going to steal it, then it's probably a bad idea. And at the same time, if you just share it, you'll probably not want to steal it by the time you ask somebody to break it. So I would say share your idea and ask people to break it. When I was first pitching Localist, that was one of the secrets, I think, was that after I did that whole investor pitch for this 1% or whatever, and really like, yeah, so you like it, right? And then I'd be like, but break it. And giving that person the honest chance to really challenge you. Because you'll come up with they'll come up with questions you never thought of. They'll challenge you. And again, it's part of building your story. Like, if you know the answer to every question, then you'll be able to explain it a lot better when you get asked that question. Because everybody thinks they're asking the best, most intelligent, they're going to break a hole in your concept. But at the end of the day, there's normally about 20 different things wrong, and people ask the same 20 things. But you need to get to them first. So, and you can't naturally get to it because I think in the beginning, especially, you have a sort of blinder on and you're like not thinking about to the side, and then, oh yeah, that could really mess stuff up. And it continues to happen when you do that. Like, just recently I was, asked by one of our advisors, I was pitching the new Localist version to them and asked them to break it, and they did. And so it wasn't like critical, but now I have to go back to the drawing board and think about, and it had to do with something as important as our business model, 2.5 years into evolving and growing the product. But we had a very, that's where this pay it forward program was evolved out of. And I think that you start to, when you ask people to challenge you and you're okay with being challenged, then don't take it personally. Take it and work on it and actually listen to what people have to say. And those would be my kind of bits of advice. Don't be afraid of failure. Ask people to break your idea and listen when they do. As a kind of 3 takeaways, I guess.
Okay, cool. And do you have like a last insight for us that you want to share that helped you grow personally?
I think that one of the other things that you hear a lot in podcasts or in when you're watching stuff on YouTube is you have to be sort of passionate about what you do and sort of true to yourself. Otherwise, it probably won't work out. I think that is something that, again, a lot of people who are working on ideas right now need to really ask themselves if it's what they're really passionate about doing. Do they want to be known about being this guy, about building this product? The answer should be yes. And the answer, and if it's not, or you don't really care if you are or not, I think figuring out what motivates and drives you is important. But also that'll help you with building out what you want to try to actually accomplish with your startup or your project, whether it be as big as Facebook or as small as just a marketing agency that you're just a marketing agency of one, personal photographer of things, right? You'll start to understand why you want to spend your time doing that thing, and I think that's extremely valuable for the days when your startup might not be going as good as you want it to be going. You'll be able to think about or reflect on why you woke up in the morning and started working on this project in the first place. And so that'd be a sort of a final piece of advice is, once you kind of get to that core, which is a lot harder than it sounds, it's easier said than done. But once you find it, I think you're a lot more likely to succeed in making your startup actually a reality. So
find your core passion. Okay.
Find your core passion. Yeah.
So
I feel like I'm such a cliche right now. Like, find your core passion. Don't be afraid of failure. This kind of stuff. But it's true. And I think for those of people who have heard it and think they're listening, I can almost guarantee you if you start doing your startup for 2 years later, you'll be like, don't be afraid of failure. Like the same kind of things that because people want to believe they're doing these things, but I think a lot of times are not being honest with themselves, including myself. People probably won't listen to me, but it is the truth in my opinion, and the most valuable things you could learn from me.
So how can people find you online and how can they get more advice?
Yeah, so I think I'm always on LinkedIn, Facebook. My name, Tegan Spinner, is pretty, I'm like the only one, so you should be able to find me there. But also Lokalist.dk, it's with a K, so Lokalist. And if you send us a message there, it actually will be me who looks at it. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and talk to people. I'm pretty helpful and do meetings and consulting like for free with people who I just want to help succeed. So I'm available and open to just talking with people because I like hearing and get motivated by other entrepreneurs. So.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And for everyone who's watching or listening, I would love for you to pick your favorite quote of today and share it on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're active, and tag us both in there. We'd love to see what your favorite takeaway was.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening to me. And thank you guys for having me.